In the lexicon of naval warfare, there is a specific category of weapon that no longer exists in the modern world. It belongs to an era of brute force, of heavy steel, and of gunpowder. It is the battleship. And among these titans of the sea, none were more feared, more powerful, or more temperamental than the Iowa class. These were ships so massive they altered the gravity of the ocean around them. They carried 9 16-inch Mark 7 guns, weapons capable of hurling a projectile the weight of a Volkswagen Beetle over 20 miles with pinpoint accuracy. But this story isn't just about a ship, it is about a mistake. A very, very big mistake made by an enemy artillery battery during the Korean War. It is the story of what happens when you poke a sleeping dragon with a stick. The dragon, in this case, was the USS Wisconsin, BB-64, a 58,000-ton floating fortress that earned the nickname Wisky. But as her crew would tell you, she wasn't a smooth drink. She was mean. She was efficient. And she had a very short fuse. The year was 1952. The Korean War, often called the Forgotten War, was grinding into a brutal stalemate. While soldiers fought and froze in the mud of the peninsula, the U.S. Navy prowled the coastlines. The mission was simple: provide naval gunfire support. Essentially, the battleships acted as mobile artillery bases, parking off the coast and raining devastation down on enemy supply lines, bunkers, and troop concentrations. It was a terrifying display of power. When a battleship fired a broadside, the concussion was so strong it would push the entire ship sideways in the water. The sound wasn't just a noise, it was a physical blow to the chest that could be felt for miles. On March 15, 1952, the USS Wisconsin was operating near Songjin, North Korea. She was close to the shore, dangerously close for a ship of her size, but her massive armor belt gave her confidence. She was bombarding enemy railway targets, disrupting the flow of supplies. It was a routine day at the office for the gunnery crews. The massive turrets rotated slowly, the barrels elevated, and the rhythmic thunder of the guns echoed off the nearby mountains. However, hidden within those mountains, camouflaged among the rocks and trees, was a North Korean 152mm artillery battery. The soldiers manning that gun looked out at the massive silhouette of the American battleship sitting just off the coast. Maybe they were brave. Maybe they were desperate. Or maybe, they just didn't realize exactly what they were looking at. They calculated the range, loaded their gun, and decided to do the unthinkable. They opened fire on the USS Wisconsin. It was a bold move. A 152mm shell is nothing to sneeze at, it can destroy a tank or a bunker. The shell whistled through the air and impacted the Wisconsin. It struck the shield of a 40mm anti-aircraft gun on the starboard side. The explosion injured 3 sailors. It caused minor structural damage. In the grand scheme of naval warfare, it was barely a scratch, a mosquito bite on the hide of an elephant. But on the bridge of the Wisconsin, the mood shifted instantly from routine operation to cold, calculated fury. The giant had been slapped. The captain looked at the damage report, then looked out at the shoreline where the smoke from the enemy gun was still visible. The rules of engagement in war are usually complex, but on that day, the logic of the USS Wisconsin was terrifyingly simple: you hit us with a rock, we will hit you with an avalanche. The order was given to the Fire Control Center. The mosquito was about to be swatted with a sledgehammer. The retaliation was not impulsive, it was mathematical. Deep inside the armored bowels of the USS Wisconsin, the fire control man received the coordinates of the offending artillery battery. In 1952, there were no digital computers, no satellite GPS. Instead, the Iowa-class battleships relied on the Mark 8 Rangekeeper, a massive, electromechanical analog computer. It was a masterpiece of gears, cams, and differentials that could calculate the speed of the ship, the rotation of the Earth, wind speed, and air density in real time to solve the ballistic equation. The solution was locked in. The giant turrets on the main deck, weighing as much as a heavy bomber, began to rotate with an ominous, mechanical hum. The order was passed to the gunhouse: load high capacity. The sailors inside the turret, working in a hot, deafening environment, rammed a 1,900-pound high-capacity (HC) projectile into the breech of the 16-inch gun. Following the shell, they rammed in 6 silk bags of propellant powder, hundreds of pounds of explosives. The massive breech block slammed shut. The red ready light flickered on in the plotting room. The Wisconsin was not going to fire a warning shot. She was going to make a statement. On the bridge, the captain gave the command. The silence of the ocean was shattered by a sound that defies description. It wasn't just a bang, it was an atmospheric event. The muzzle blast from the 16-inch guns created a shockwave that flattened the water for hundreds of yards around the ship. A massive cloud of orange fire and black smoke erupted from the barrels, momentarily hiding the entire ship from view. The projectile, traveling at supersonic speed, arched high into the Korean sky. It covered the distance to the shore in seconds. For the North Korean artillery crew who had fired the initial shot, the realization of their mistake likely came too late. They had fired a 152mm shell, the Wisconsin had replied with a 406mm shell, a round weighing nearly a ton, filled with high explosives. The impact was cataclysmic. When a 16-inch shell strikes land, it doesn't just create a crater, it alters the geography. The shell slammed directly into the artillery position hidden on the hillside. The explosion threw tons of rock, dirt, trees, and metal hundreds of feet into the air. The shockwave stripped the foliage from the surrounding area. Where there had once been a fortified gun placement and a distinct ridgeline, there was now only a smoking, gaping hole in the earth. The artillery battery didn't just get destroyed, it was deleted from existence. But the Wisconsin wasn't done. According to naval lore, she didn't just fire one round. She fired a full salvo, all 9 guns, or at least a significant sustained bombardment, just to be absolutely sure. The hillside was churned into dust. It was an overwhelming, disproportionate use of force that stunned everyone watching. Observing this terrifying display of firepower was a small U.S. Navy escort destroyer, the USS Buck, DD-761, which was sailing alongside the battleship. The crew of the Buck watched the massive battleship erupt in flame, saw the mountain on the shore practically evaporate, and then looked at the tiny dent on the Wisconsin's 40mm gun shield. The disparity was almost comical. The captain of the USS Buck grabbed his signal lamp. In a moment of dry naval wit that would go down in history, he flashed a message over to the giant battleship. It was just 2 words, repeated twice. Temper, temper. It was a gentle reminder to the angry giant, calm down, you've already won. The Wisconsin had proven a point that remains true to this day, in the hierarchy of the ocean, the battleship is the king, and the king does not tolerate disrespect. The temper incident became legendary, a testament to the sheer, terrifying power of the Iowa class. But as the Korean War ended and the world moved into the missile age, these giants found themselves facing a new enemy, one they couldn't shoot: obsolescence. After the Korean War, the USS Wisconsin, like the other giants of her class, was put to sleep. She was decommissioned, sealed in mothballs, and left to rust quietly as the world moved into the age of guided missiles and nuclear submarines. The experts declared the battleship dead. They said big guns were obsolete dinosaurs. But dinosaurs have a habit of coming back in unexpected ways. In the 1980s, under President Reagan's plan for its 600-ship Navy, the Wisconsin was resurrected. She was pulled from the graveyard, stripped of her rust, and given a high-tech makeover. They kept the massive 16-inch guns, but they added modern Tomahawk cruise missiles and Phalanx defense systems. She became a terrifying hybrid, a World War II brawler with a space-age brain. And in 1991, during Operation Desert Storm, the Wisky sailed to the Persian Gulf to remind the world why she was built. The Iraqis had dug in deep on Faylaka Island off the coast of Kuwait. The Wisconsin was tasked with softening them up. But this time, she didn't just fire blindly. She launched a small, buzzsaw-sounding unmanned aerial vehicle, UAV, called a Pioneer drone. This remote-controlled aircraft flew over the island to act as a spotter, looking for targets for the battleship's guns. What happened next is one of the most bizarre and unique moments in military history. As the drone buzzed low over the Iraqi trenches, the soldiers on the ground heard the sound. They looked up and saw the small plastic plane circling. They didn't shoot at it. They knew exactly what that drone represented. It was the eye of the beast. They knew that wherever that drone looked, a 2,000-pound shell from the USS Wisconsin would follow seconds later. They knew that the mountain erasing power of the battleship was trained on them. Terrified by the mere presence of the spotter drone, the Iraqi soldiers climbed out of their trenches. They took off their shirts, waved white flags, and waved their hands in the air, surrendering directly to the drone. The operator of the UAV, sitting safely aboard the battleship miles away, couldn't believe his eyes. He radioed the commanding officer, "Sir, they are surrendering to the robot." It was the first time in the history of warfare that human beings surrendered to an unmanned machine. The USS Wisconsin hadn't even fired a shot. Her reputation alone was enough to end the fight. Shortly after the war, the Wisconsin was decommissioned for the final time. The cost of running a crew of 1,600 men and burning tons of heavy fuel oil was simply too high for a peacetime navy. The era of the battleship was officially over. The giants had served their purpose. Today, the USS Wisconsin is berthed in Norfolk, Virginia, serving as a museum ship. She sits quietly in the harbor, her guns plugged and silent, visited by tourists and school children who walk her teak decks. She is a relic of a bygone age, a time when naval power was measured in inches of steel and tons of gunpowder. But if you walk past the bridge and look closely at the superstructure, you can still feel the presence of the temper ship. She stands as a reminder to anyone who looks: you can build missiles, you can build lasers, and you can build stealth fighters. But sometimes, nothing sends a message quite like a 58,000-ton mountain mover with a bad attitude.